I'll just talk about what I want to talk about, if that's what we're going to do. This is my chart, right? Because someone asked me about essential dignities. Because everyone's like, oh, my most dominant planet. My most dominant planet. And they'll call themselves Saturn Doms. I'm like, Dom. You couldn't dom your way out of a paper sub. You know. And so when people say I'm a Saturn Dom or I'm a Pluto Dom, I mean that nonsense. You know. That idea came from a really important principle in astrology, which is essential dignities, right? And essential dignities have to do with the condition or the strength of a planet. And so I'm here to tell you, I think all the stupid dominant stuff is exactly what I just said, stupid. I think the whole Walter Pullen thing is stupid. Not that he probably wasn't a smart guy who came up with all this wild mathematical stuff. It's just that to me it was erected on a complete misunderstanding. I would not. To me, the outer planets don't rule a goddamn thing. You see? They weren't part of the original rulership scheme because no one knew they were there. And ancient astrology, and people get mad at me for playing with the ball. And I'm here to tell you, because I have ADHD. And for you neurotypical people out there, it's easy for you not to play with balls, isn't it? Harder for me. I'm just going to have fun because there's only 3 people here. No one's even wanting their chart. I'm going to talk about essential dignity because I'm very dignified. I'm still saying essential dignities because this is important. And we can look at what your more dignified planets are as an example of this. And so people will say, oh, you know, this is my most dominant planet. But what it's really alluding to is essential dignities, right? And the 7, right? The 7 sacred planets, right? Those were the rulers, right? So I don't even include Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto in any of that sort of nonsense. To me, they don't rule anything. I still use them. I got my chart right here. I think it's quite interesting that I have Pluto and Saturn so close to my moon. I mean, the moon moves fast, you see what I'm saying? But that has a big effect on our lives. I'm not saying it doesn't. I am saying, though, that Pluto doesn't rule anything. Doesn't rule a sign. See? So, when we talk about dignities, we're only talking about those original 7 planets. And the most dignified a planet can be is being in its own home, right? So think of it like this. You rule a sign. You're a planet, right? You rule a sign. That means that sign is your house. You know. I mean, I'm washing all my sheets right now because they're covered in sin. But I am most comfortable playing at my house. I have my stuff. I have my toys. I have my things, you know. And I'm most powerful, you know, with my stuff in my house. When I go play at someone else's house, who's someone I'm very familiar with, you know, I might still be very comfortable. I might be exalted in their house, but I'm still more comfortable. And you see, so a planet's rulership is its most dignified position. And then its second most dignified is exaltation. And then the signs opposite are not dignified, right? The sign of detriment opposite the rulership or domicile, and the sign of fall opposite exaltation. So think of it like this. Like being in your enemy's house, you know, it's not very comfortable. It's like being in a place that you do not belong. And your typical expression is just flipped on its head. You know, think about, for example, Venus rules Taurus. She's very happy in Taurus, right? Because Venus rules sensual pleasure. Yeah. She rules nice things. She rules comfort. All this stuff, right, that we think about with Taurus. Very Venusian. But when she's in Scorpio, right? Think about this too. Venus and Taurus. They're very uh, they're very sensual, right? They're the kind of typically Taurus Venus has people approaching her, right? You know, she has people pursuing, she gets to, you know, she has dates, she goes out, like she's got a love life and a social life. Where Venus and Scorpio rather is like turned off on its head. And it's not like they can't be social, it's just, you know, there's a dark side to it, right? There's suspicion, there's obsession. It's not the typical expression that Venus is used to. It makes her more underhanded. It makes her more cunning, right? Makes her a little more, dare I say, predatory in a way. It's one of the reasons I love Scorpio Venus, because it's trine mine, and I like that sort of expression. Doesn't mean it's bad. But when we see these planets in signs that they don't like in our charts, they typically mean that it's weaker, right? That planet's expression and the good things that it can do for us will be weaker. Now, planets that have good stuff, right, will do, you know. For example, I was gonna show you really quick. My Jupiter is really, really well dignified. He is. That's a well dignified Jupiter. Yes, you are. Yes, you're so dignified. I'm so out of it right now. It's that dignified Jupiter. You see, Jupiter is in his own sign, Sagittarius, right? That makes them very well dignified. But there are other levels of dignity too. There's what's called the Egyptian bounds or terms. And so every sign is divided up into 5 sections, right? And each section is ruled by a planet. Those are the Egyptian bounds or terms, right? And I don't know how the degrees were figured out. I don't think it's arbitrary, but I don't know how it worked. But you see, Jupiter is also in his own bound, right? And then we also have what are called triplicities. So each of the elementals, right? Each of the elements has what are called triplicity lords, right? So a sign of a certain element, so it's a fire sign, right, will be ruled by a certain planet by day and by night. Yeah. And Jupiter is that one by night. So you see, Jupiter's in his own sign. He's in his own bound or term. He's in his own triplicity. And there's another level called face, but we won't get into that, and decan. But you see, those 3 things right there make this a very, very happy Jupiter. But what else do you notice here? He's got this RX deal. He's retrograde. Jupiter's retrograde. So what does that do? In my case, you can see very practically how that manifested in my life. Jupiter is very well dignified, but he didn't do anything very nice until very recently in my life. Until I was like 40 years old. Or I am 40 years old. So that's a good example of, like a very practical example of how these things work out. My Saturn is pretty well dignified too, but he's retrograde also. So these things get delayed quite a bit, right? Anyway, so that's just an example. We'll start looking at people's charts now, because I know you guys will tar and feather me. It's just like, but my chart's a pretty interesting example. It's already out there. So. Aquarius.